Israel has continued its military operations in Gaza in an effort to force Hamas to release more hostages and give up control of the territory. Several members of a Palestinian family were killed in an Israeli strike overnight as Israel vowed to hold more land until their demands were met.
Now, supply of food and aid into the territory has already been cut off, affecting some 2 million Palestinians recovering from 15 months of war. Well, joining us now is Chris Sidoti of the UN Commission of Inquiry on Occupied Palestinian Territory. Chris, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today.
Thank you.
Now, Chris, ever since the conflict restarted because of the ceasefire broke down, we've seen at least one foreign aid worker among dozens who've been killed in the attacks. Are you starting to see aid agencies withdraw their personnel from the conflict?
There are some that have done so, and in fact there was a significant reduction in the number of foreign aid workers in Gaza at the time of the attack that killed the Australian aid worker many months ago. So this is not a new phenomenon. But there's increasing fear amongst international organisations that their own humanitarian workers are being targeted and as a result are being killed and injured.
You know, Chris, Israel had already stopped the humanitarian aid from entering the territory 2 weeks ago. Is Israel at risk of breaching international law?
At risk? Israel's been breaching international law consistently for many years, and the breaches are just accumulating. The Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu has shown that he is incapable of complying with Israeli national law, and so there's no reason to expect that he would comply with international law. He's simply incapable of doing it. But the Israeli forces are in severe breach of international law, and similarly, the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad fighters who committed war crimes on the 7th of October are also in breach of international law.
You know, I just want to take you up on that point of breaching international law here and talk about this report that came out on March 13th from the UN Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Occupied Palestinian Territory, which alleges that deliberate attacks have been aimed against mothers and children. They're talking about targets against IVF clinics and fertility clinics as well. Is there evidence of this?
Of course there's evidence. We have very strict rules about the collection of evidence and the level of corroboration that's necessary. We rely primarily on first-hand evidence, eyewitness evidence from victims and witnesses, but also then that needs to be backed up. We have an enormous amount of digital evidence available now. There has never been a war that has so much photographic and video material published, particularly by Israeli soldiers, on the internet. So we have thousands, literally thousands of pieces of video and photographic evidence that we make use of. We call on the expertise of lawyers and doctors to tell us their views of what's happened. We have military experts and forensic experts on our staff. So we don't make any finding without evidence, and we don't rely on media reports or third or fourth party reports.
Now, this evidence, of course, made up this report that I'm talking about. And in the same report, it concluded, and I'm going to quote here from the report, please. This was done with the intent to destroy the Palestinians in Gaza as a group in whole or in part. Chris, anyone with a thesaurus could succinctly bring that down to one particular word. Talk to us about the politics of semantics in this report and at the UN.
We're lawyers, and so we go by the law. There is a great difference between the law of genocide and popular understandings of genocide.
Okay.
The law of genocide, like most criminal law, has both components of intention and components of act. In this report, we have looked only at the components of act. There are 5 categories of act that may constitute genocide, and we have focused on one of them, and that is impairing the births of the particular population. We have not yet examined the question of intent, and that is called genocidal purpose. We have that analysis underway, we're looking at it, and we'll talk about it. We'll issue a report on that when we're ready. But at this stage, we're not ready to form a conclusion on that issue.
Of course, the ICJ, as well as deliberating South Africa's case of genocide against Israel as well. I want to talk about how this former Israeli hostage, Eli Sharabi, he testified at the UN Security Council just recently that he witnessed Hamas fighters enjoying UN meals while hostages starved. What do you have to say to that?
If that's the case, of course, it's a serious matter. Hamas, firstly, is holding the hostages illegally. That in itself is a war crime. Secondly, if it is holding hostages, even if doing so illegally, it has obligations to provide them with the necessities of life. So it has those obligations, it must meet those obligations. Now, we recognise that it's very difficult for Hamas to do so when Israel is imposing a total siege on Gaza and not allowing food supplies in. But nonetheless, it has that obligation if it's holding the hostages. And so that too is a war crime of mistreatment of hostages who are being unlawfully held.